Can I ask a question about one of the false apologies or bad apologies?
Yep.
Um, I didn't mean to hurt you one.
Yep.
It still feels like in my mind there's some value in bringing clarification to a relationship about intention. Like when I bump someone in the hallway, and this is maybe not the best example, but I bump someone, I want them to know that I didn't come up and, I was not trying to body slam them to hurt them. Like I want them to know that there's no malice.
Sure.
Is that true? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think in certain contexts that's fine, but you probably wouldn't sit down and have it's a clarification in a moment. If it's used to be a clarifier, that's great. But most of the time when we see it used, I don't want you to think I'm really a bad person who would hurt you. And the reality is I am a bad person at times. I am in flesh at times, and I do make choices that are uncaring and unloving. And I want you to deal with me on that level, to offer me mercy and not feel like I need to. There's other ways and other means to say, and Genesis mandate would be one of those. I want to pursue care and kindness to you. I know I'm not always going to do that, but I want you to know my intention is to love you and care for you as much as possible. And there are going to be these moments where all I care about is something else. And so I think there's plenty of relational context to communicate that desire to do good to one another. I just don't know if it's appropriate when we're trying to help them. We're trying to let them know we get how much we hurt them, because all that phrase can do is say, I'm really a good guy, rather than, in this moment, I was not at all a good guy or a good girl. I was walking in something other than care for you, and I want to own that. I want to acknowledge that. That's how we would approach it. They're spinning. The wheels are spinning.
Yeah, I guess I still feel like I can think of like some scenarios where the hurt came from that person thinking there was malice. And so it's almost like it feels like it's appropriate to be like, oh, wait, I want to apologize. I totally missed you. And I see how that hurt. The second layer of hurt that you were feeling, I want to resolve for you by letting you know that wasn't my intention.
Sure.
So you don't, so you get to be free from
that. I just wouldn't do them in the same conversation.
It's just not in the same conversation, it's just different.
I wouldn't do those things in the same conversation. I would do a really good job of owning what you did wrong. And then if you need to clarify something they are perceiving, that's a different conversation. I just wouldn't mix them up.
Because it takes a lot of self-control, Pat.
It does. It absolutely does. But if they're feeling hurt, I want to first minister to the hurt. And then, hey, can we talk about this? Because I'm not sure we're on the same page about this. And I could form an assertiveness statement about, let's walk this through. And there's all kinds of places. How can I, how could I help you perceive my intentions better? But I wouldn't make it the same conversation. That's why it's important to me to not use those words when I'm acknowledging it. It becomes a separate thing that is worth. And I agree. In the example you're saying, I think that's true. That's a great one. The other place you can address it, your intentions, is in the empathetic part. You can express your desire to do good, and I failed in this. My heart is to do you good, and so there's a way you can say this is my love for you. This is my intention to you, without saying, and in this case I blew it. It's just there's an acknowledgement of failure on your good intentions, even in the empathy.
Okay. Yeah.
And if they're making a judgment about your intentions, then I think that can be a different conversation.
Yeah.
That's how I would tend to approach it.
Yeah. Time for another question too, Pat. I know you wanted to move on.
Sure. No, that's good. Okay.
All of these, the kind of the framework here is there's a hurt, and so we're addressing a hurt.
Yep.
It kind of assumes that hurting someone involves a wrong. Like, but I tend to think in that kind of direction, but others who have a more moral bent would say hurt doesn't necessarily determine right or wrong. It's more has an actual standard. And so it's like, even if somebody's really hurting, there's no apology necessarily needed in another framework. But do you, I don't know, does a hurt necessitate an apology, or does it only have to be if the hurt came from a moral wrong, like a biblical standard that's been violated, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dub. For me, and I'm gonna rob Greg's analogy of that he used at DTC, which I've been telling everybody. I think it's a great simple picture, which you always have the props for. You carry the props for this with you, and so you have this relationship, and you have the issue. You have in those two things, and the way I would teach it, the way I understand it, is the relationship is always going to be the top priority. It doesn't mean you don't deal with the issue. It doesn't mean you don't care about the issue. It just means what we're going to try to do is maintain relationship. However we deal with the issue, we're going to keep contending with the supremacy of maintaining relationship. So if someone comes to me and says they're hurt, I want to honor that relationship and acknowledge I'm a broken human being, and there's probably something I could have done better to let my faith express itself in love in my relationship with them. So that's my moral law, Dov. That's how I operate. I am called to have my faith express itself in love. I don't need to find my wrongness or my sin on a list. Anything that does not represent faith expressing itself in love, that they experience as love, then I can own. I can find a place in humility to say, this was hurtful to you. And in every case, there was one case where someone brought me a hurt, and I just go into, Lord, help me find something that I can acknowledge, that I can hold out an olive branch of peace and desire to say, I missed you. That was just wrong. Not worrying about whatever else they might be judging wrong in that moment, but just trying to build this bridge back to relationship. And so that's my moral standard. If someone else has a different moral standard than that, well, then this may not be a good tool, because the presumption here is the goal is care and connection, not are we keeping the law. And if I'm keeping the law and you're hurt, sucks to be you. Versus I care about relationship and care and connection here, and there's probably something I could do better to express care and connection to you, some of which will be on a list of moral sins, either a to do or a to don't, and some will just be, I just wasn't thinking about you. I was thinking about the task. I was thinking about my own, agenda. I was thinking about my own flesh and feeding it in some way, or, just being done with this conversation, and so I was short because I wanted to go do something else. There's all kinds of ways I could declare low value on a human being and not have faith express itself in love in conversation or in actions or in attitudes. That's where I think connection goes. That's where that relationship versus the issue. The issue is they're hurt. Do I care about the relationship enough to listen to and try to find it? And honestly, in that one situation, I could not own anything. Doesn't mean I didn't do anything wrong. It's just the Spirit was not helping me discern what it was. So there was nothing. But in every other case, when someone brings a hurt, I can say, you know what? I find something that I can begin that conversation to humble myself and say, you know what? You're right. I was quick to dismiss you or your concern or whatever it might be. And that's a very different thing, because I don't feel called to keep a moral code. I feel called to have my faith expressed in love and to be one with my brothers.
That's helpful. Yeah, thanks.
But if someone else has a different conviction, this is not a good tool.
Sure.
Because they're going to want to say, oh, wait a minute, that wasn't wrong. Okay, well, you've just told me what your priority is. It's being right, not being connected. And okay, well then we're in the wrong conversation. And there will be times, trust me, where exactly what Ben is talking about, somebody comes and they just bring something really crazy to the table. You tried to do this. I wasn't even conscious you were in the room. I had no motivation to do anything. And I'm going to try to own that. And then I have to come back and go, maybe here's a tool you could use. If something lands really hard, maybe you could go ask somebody a question about what they were thinking rather than bringing a judgment. And so there's a way to bring in a different conversation, just not in the place of hurt and ministry to it. So you can shepherd people to a different relational outcome. Because not everybody's going to do this well, even in the hurt part. They can get pretty grabby when they're feeling hurt. So can we humble ourselves first, encourage one another? For all of these tools to work, somebody has to be in the Spirit. You don't have to both be in the Spirit, but somebody has to be in the Spirit. And hopefully the tools help us both move to a place of being in the Spirit.